Everyone, and welcome to the night shift sessions with Mainstreet Australia. This is our third one for the year, so we're very excited to be here tonight and to be delivering this session with you all. If I can just ask you all to put yourself on mute if you're not asking any questions, that'd be great. Thank you so much, Mary. And yeah, before I continue, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which I'm coming to you from, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging.
Liz, sorry to interrupt. Bruce has just
not at
messaged
all.
me. He's struggling to get in, so I'm not sure if you could send him the link again, perhaps.
Okay.
Sorry for interrupting you.
No, not at all. All right, I will do that. And actually, this is a great chance for me to send him the link. And whilst I'm doing that, it'd be great if we could get introductions from our first two panelists. So tonight, our session is Meet the Small Business Commissioners. So in Australia, we have small business commissioners pretty much in every state all around Australia. And I actually have a personal connection with the Small Business Commissioner. The very first Small Business Commissioner that was introduced was in Victoria 20 years ago. I think that's right, Linda. And
Exactly.
Happy anniversary. I understand you
recently
had an
so
anniversary, which is just crazy to add all of those years up or decades up. But when it was introduced back in 2003, it was quite innovative, and it definitely was such a welcome initiative from the small business community to have an independent commissioner there advocating and helping small businesses to manage and mediate disputes, which was the principal focus of small business commissioners. But over the years, and as we'll find out tonight, that role has certainly transitioned, and it is more about advocacy and supporting small businesses to succeed and to grow. A big welcome to Linda McEllery-Smith, who is the Victorian Small Business Commissioner, and also to Dominique Lamb, who is the Queensland Small Business Commissioner. I might hand over to you, Linda, if you would like to introduce yourself, whilst I'll just put myself on mute and see if I can get Bruce Bilson, who's the Australian Federal Small Business Commissioner, and I'll see if we can get him on the Zoom. Over to you, Linda.
Fantastic. Thanks, Liz. And make sure you tell Bruce we say it was user error at his end in terms of any technical difficulties. So thank you and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for giving up your time at this hour of the day to jump in and hear a little bit about what we do in the different commissions. So Liz is spot on. We celebrated our 20th anniversary birthday on the 1st of May. So all of the commissions around the country are a little bit different, and Dominique will speak to the role that she and her commission has in Queensland. But from the Victorian perspective, what we do is provide alternative to either free or low cost alternative dispute resolution for small businesses. And as Liz flagged, we also advocate on the part of small businesses and effectively champion the perspective of small business, both from an opportunity perspective and also issues which are obstacles or challenges that governments are, making life harder for businesses at time. And that can indeed be all levels of government, including local as well. So, and that's both within Victoria. Within my legislation, that's both within Victoria and nationally as well. So here in Victoria, the Small Business Commission can help any small business who's having a dispute with someone who's effectively not a retail consumer or an employee. It's like a business to business or business to government dispute. So if a small business is having a dispute with another small business, a large business, government, not-for-profit, councils, what have you, insert all kinds of variations, we have jurisdiction to help. We also have very specific functions in relation to retail leasing, which I know will be very interesting to you from a Mainstreet perspective as well. So in the Retail Leasing Act, we play a key role in supporting alternative dispute resolution prior to access to the tribunal in Victoria, VCAT. And we also have a key role in relation to providing education and information and taking what we see from disputes and where things have gone a bit wrong, and sharing information, education to help businesses, small businesses, or be they landlords, avoid coming into problems in the first place. So we played a key role through COVID in implementing the Commercial Tenancy Relief Scheme, which I'm sure is well known to those of you So we were playing a key role in implementing that and mediating the disputes effectively between the landlords and the tenants, and noting that often we're dealing with landlords who are also themselves landlords, small businesses themselves. We also have a role with farm debt mediation as well. So farmers who are in trouble with paying their mortgages on their farms or equipment, owner drivers and forestry contractors, gig workers who are not employees, also fall within the jurisdiction of the Commission as well. So we've got a pretty broad remit in terms of what we do. So I guess the takeaway, as well as you'll hear in the conversation this evening, is we're here to help. And if we're not the right spot, we'll make sure you end up, or one of your members ends up at the right spot as well. So Liz, you know, I could go on for hours about all of this, so I'll give Dom a chance to talk at this point.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Linda. Yeah, over to you, Dom. Is it similar for you in Queensland?
Yes, so the Queensland Small Business Commissioner is set up to enhance the operating environment for small business across Queensland, and then to minimise the time and costs associated with disputes. They're very, very similar and very broad. So our team is split into two. In effect, we take calls from around the state of Queensland around dispute, and we try and put them through alternative dispute resolution. Most of the time that looks like mediation. We have about an 80% success rate when it comes to some of these issues, and they look like things like small debt claims, issues between landlord and tenant. It could be, you know, licensing arrangements. They are very, very broad. Primarily, we do get a lot of, you know, tenant and landlord dispute more than anything else. And then the second part of our team looks to advocate on behalf of small business. So we consult into government on things like the small business strategy. There may be pieces of legislation up for review. It might be liquor licensing laws, trading hour matters. It could be building and construction legislation. It could be anything. It's very broad. But we also work with what's called the Small Business Friendly Charter. And that's where we work with, at the moment, 45 of the 77 councils across Queensland to make sure that those regions are as small business friendly as possible. And that's really important from certainly a placemaking perspective. And in fact, that is one of our communities of practice that they focus on when they come into the charter. And at the moment, that covers about 80% of the small businesses in Queensland. So I guess we have, you know, as Linda said, a very, very broad remit. But at the end of the day, similarly, we see ourselves as connectors. So if you're looking for something when you're a small business, we like to take you and connect you to where you need to go. And that isn't always us, but it can be anything from information about grants, supports, financial counsellors, wellness coaches, whatever it is that, you know, the small business needs to get them to where they need to go.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dominic, for that introduction. And I'm just checking, I've sent Bruce the link, but I can't see that he's...
I can see his smiling face.
And I can see your smiling face, Liz. Hello, Commissioner. How are you, ma'am?
Good evening, sir.
Hello, Commissioner Dom. How are you? And
Hello,
placemakers, municipal messiahs, economic development executives, all those doing awesome things in Eco Dev. Hi, how are you? Liz, I'm sorry, I had to show some dexterity getting around Treasury's prohibition of the use of Zoom. So we've managed to nail that, and here I am. So my apologies for my late arrival, but you've had the Bon Jovis, the real talent of the evening, opening up on the unknown Nebraskan country and western singer that's making up the numbers. But a bit like Dom and Linda, the Australian Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman's Office has three main functions. We are a dispute resolution agency. Our alternative dispute resolution processes handle about 6,000 to 6,500 matters a year. For people on the call, just think about a small business going to court in our jurisdiction. It's not a tribunal. It's not the local Maggies in our world. It's the federal court. So that's $200,000 in a couple of years just to start. And that's ridiculous for a small and family business. So we'd get in and try and resolve those matters as quickly as we can and provide that dispute resolution support for a number of industry codes around franchising, food and grocery codes into the supermarket chains, the oil industry. That's always fun. Horticulture and dairy, where you've got many producers and only a couple of milk processors and things can get ugly. So that's function number one. Function number two is a policy and advocacy function. So we provide around 100 submissions a year. We get consulted by Commonwealth departments, agencies, regulators. I say get consulted, that's being polite. We make sure we're consulted because there is a bit of a misconception at times that a small business is a shrink-wrapped version of a really big one, which is just ridiculous. So we get in and try and bring field evidence and clear insights about the small and family business journey and what that means for regulators, program designers and lawmakers. And then lastly, we tell the story. We do that in a couple of ways, showcasing better practice and who's doing well so people avoid problems to begin with. We also have a data analytics team that digs deeply into the stories of 2.5 million small and family businesses and tries to provide evidence to persuade decision makers, not just anecdotes. And we also, frankly, try and put wind in the sails of small and family businesses so there's more enterprising men and women looking to pursue that journey for their livelihoods. Liz, it's not our gift to make sure every business succeeds. We can't do that, but we work hard to make sure none fail from not knowing about something that might have helped. And in many cases, that help is the collaboration I enjoy with the state small business commissioners and other agencies where we're like a concierge. We can't necessarily deliver everyone's needs, but we will work our best to land people where they can best get the support that helps. So that's essentially what we do.
Amazing. And that is a lot. That is a lot, Bruce and Linda and Dom. So thank you so much for that overview and introduction. I will call out now to the audience. I'm sure my mind's filling with lots of questions, but if anyone has got any questions around the role and what our commissioners do, please don't be shy. Please pop a question in the chat or put your hand up and feel free to come off mute and ask away. But Bruce, Linda and Dominic, you would know that our members are principally working with small businesses and traders on main streets and high streets and in town centres. So we're principally, we do a lot with businesses that obviously, retail, facing bricks and mortar businesses. So what's your take on what's happening at the coalface in terms of trends and things that are impacting particularly retail businesses on main streets? What are you seeing in your roles? I'm just wondering if there's, if we can, if there's the same sorts of things that are happening in Queensland as they are in Victoria. Obviously, even today we heard, the 12th consecutive rise in interest rates. And this is really going to put the pressure on small businesses, but and also on individuals. Like all of us are feeling the pinch, and we all talk and hear about cost of living pressures, but it is going to impact main streets and main street businesses the most. So just wondering what you're seeing in your roles and how your roles might be, pivoting to provide, any different or, maybe additional support in these times. Bruce, would you like to go first?
Well, that's an unexpected invitation. I thought Dom and Linda might have leapt in, but let me have a bit of a go. Look, the business conditions are pretty soft in many sectors, and particularly in retailing. On the, there's been some improvements in sales volumes, but that's not so much around more sales. It seems to be inflationary pressures on the price of those sales. So that's playing out in a number of different ways. Confidence is not great at the moment in the retail world. Margins are being squeezed. You've got one of Australia's leading former retail advocates on this call in Dom, and she can give you more of an insight. But from our point of view, we're hearing a lot of pain points and many headwinds. There's no sloppy margins to be made. COVID's seen a big uptick in e-commerce, and even for your discerning consumer, they will check what they can get online and then rock up to, a bricks and mortar store and say, look, I can pull this off, my deal or whatever at this price, what can you match it? So that's great. Those e-commerce channels, digitalization's opened up new markets, but it's also had a real impact on margins, particularly where there's some commoditization of what's being offered in the retail space. The other thing to think about as well is that, when interest rates are up, that'll hit a small business in three ways. One, it means usually less discretionary expenditure for consumers, and we're seeing that coming through. A lot of essentials are costing more, and that's eating into the discretionary spend. Two, small businesses and retailers, they are borrowers as well. And let's not forget, about 40% of all small business loans are actually secured by personal assets, overwhelmingly the family home or personal guarantee. So they'll be paying that price pinch as well. And thirdly, you see a lot of tenancy costs, occupancy costs have multiple triggers, whether it's turnover, CPI plus, these sorts of things. That's really, that CPI is very steep. So you're seeing many faced with significant rent uplifts at a time when their profitability is under pressure, and that simply adds to it. My final point is, though, there is still an overhang, let's call it a scarring from COVID. It's changed a lot of behaviour. Our CBDs have seen demand head out to, regional centres and communities probably represented by the people on this call. So that's been good for those centres overall, but it's really hollowed out activity and vitality in the CBD areas, an increase in working from home. And frankly, in some cases, Liz, there's lead in the saddlebag. If you and I were retailers and we took a deferral of our leases, we maybe got cut some slack by our bank, our equipment finance provider said, look, lay off on the costs of paying for the refrigeration or whatever the case may be. That's all coming home to roost at a time when we might have quite a change in our foot traffic. Our whole viability might be challenged, yet we've got more costs, debt to deal with in a time of thinner margins. That's playing out with payment disputes in our office. 40% of all the matters that we deal with are payment disputes, people just not getting paid, or some contest over whether the work or the sale or the service was fully completed because of, maybe a delay in the supply chains. And then finally, if you're supplying into some of those retail business, not so much the small ones, but the bigger ones, notoriously bad at paying their small business suppliers in a timely way. We've got, about a quarter of our big businesses paying their small business suppliers in 30 days. 1 in 4 are taking more than 120 days. And why do they do that? Because they can. Power imbalances.
Yes,
So
yes.
interesting times.
Yes. Yeah, no, all good points. And yeah, over to you, Dominique. Are you seeing the same sorts of things in Queensland and with your retail expert hat on?
So I guess when you look at the figures, it's quite clear that we're in a consumer recession, and we know that absolutely hits those discretionary spend categories first. And even if we look at sort of our call dispute levels, I mean, our call volumes are up by about 140%, primarily in discretionary spend categories for retailers, anything from sort of hairdressing to news agency to gifting, anything that isn't essential to a household is where we're seeing those disputes now arise, particularly with landlords. I think Bruce is right in terms of what we hear as we travel across the state. Typically, the top 3 issues that we hear are, skilled workers, I can't get them. There's a lot of burnout for small businesses. It's been a pretty tough time. Housing, if I can get them, I can't house them. And then the third thing is the cost of living. And we're talking, increases in freight, increases in, insurance, electricity, labour costs, payroll tax, superannuation, you name it, all of it's gone up at once. And I think for most of these small businesses, the difficulty and the shrinking of margins is becoming something that is being raised with us on a frequent basis. Lots of discussion around pricing. How do I price my product? How do I get the most out of my margins? Where can I negotiate where I can't, especially when there is that power imbalance, and what does that look like? I think for our main streets, especially throughout Queensland, obviously there's quite a bit of regional communities. We've seen really big shifts in those CBDs where we've moved a lot of retail out, we put a lot of services in. They've definitely changed face. A lot of the councils are certainly investing in placemaking, looking at revitalisation projects, certainly looking at hosting events, activations, community gardens, anything that they can do to get that foot traffic up. But at the end of the day, we also know from our calls and certainly the disputes is that landlords are equally putting up those rents, and they are very steep increases. Now, interestingly, in Queensland and Western Australia, occupancy rates are quite high. So, we know that landlords are saying to us, in effect, we didn't put our rents up during that period. We deferred and waived. We've never got the returns on those rents. And now we're seeking to lock people out or remove them because we know we can get tenants and we can get them quickly. And we know that we can put those rents up much higher than what we've seen before. That is certainly a trend that's happening sort of across the state. But then we also have pockets in regional communities where you've got long-term land holds where landlords just simply are not letting or tenanting their buildings, and they're actively happy to leave them vacant. They don't want to engage in programs that will put short-term tenants in there. For them, it's just about simply not having anyone in, which of course is causing a lot more antisocial behaviour. So we are seeing spikes in crime across the state of Queensland, especially in those locations where they aren't activated, there aren't people going and sort of actively visiting.
Yeah, I'm nodding vigorously, Dominic, because I'm agreeing with everything that you've said. And I know just handing over to Linda, being a Victorian myself and in Melbourne, that everything that you've just described, it's all happening here as well. Everything that you've just said. So yeah, Linda, maybe with your response, maybe if you can talk a little bit about some of the responses from the commissioners, and in particular the Small Business Friendly Council initiative, and how that's helping to address some of these issues, particularly the one that Bruce mentioned in terms of payments to small businesses. I believe that's in the charter, just in terms of getting better payment terms for small businesses.
It is, Liz, and what I will say to those on the call too is, though, it's not all depressing either. Like there is, so we're seeing exactly the same things in Victoria. You've got the IR changes coming in, retail valuations where they're rocketing up and people can't agree, and huge wait times to get a specialist retail valuer, and people who, with all good intent and based on historical precedent, signed up to leases with, as Bruce said, plus CPI, and that looked very different when you signed a lease 3 years ago to what that looks like right now. And then energy transition as being a big one as well too, in terms of not only energy costs but transitioning into carbon neutral. So I think in terms of, if I touch on payment times as well, because that's captured in Victoria, we've got 65 of the 79 councils who've signed up to the Small Business Friendly Charter. And one, as Dominic said, Liz, as you said, one of the key features of that is payment times to small businesses, as well as creating a supportive environment for small businesses, facilitating networks and having proper complaints processes in place and reducing red tape. But sort of in terms of payment terms times in Victoria, it's actually been extended out beyond local councils to the Victorian state government. So pre-COVID, the Victorian state government had payment times of 30 days. You had to pay a small business within 30 days. During COVID, in recognition of the cash flow pressures that small businesses were under, that was reduced down to 10 business days. And by and large, the state government departments and agencies which are covered by it are doing pretty well actually with that. And it's a conversation that Bruce and I have been having as well with our fellow commissioners, including Dominic and the others around the country, is, well, if state governments and with all the internal, utopia screening probably right now, right? So it's no surprise to anyone, some of the internal bureaucracies and, just processes that are involved in running government, and to some extent rightly so, because of its taxpayers' money, and every cent should be treated like precious gold and not thrown away, of course. But at the same time, if government, with all of those constraints and potentially aged IT systems and complexity, if they can pay small businesses on time, why can't businesses who are $100 million plus, revenue, all that kind of stuff? So why can't these businesses get it right? So I think there's much more we can do in terms of payment times of small businesses, but having that commitment at a government level that the government is leading the way with this space is really good. And I flip it around so much from not only the government leading the way, but if government even can do it, well, why can't other businesses, particularly large businesses? And we've seen a significant spike in our space in disputes at the Commission, in business-to-business disputes, which are often about managing cash flow with the business. A lot of those disputes about unpaid invoices, for example, are not, there's actually really no dispute other than one party hasn't actually paid it. There's no disagreement about the service that's been provided or the goods that have been provided, what have you. It's the the other stretching out their own time terms as long as they possibly can. So I think also here in Victoria, if I can share too, Liz, as well, there's been work around under a number of different umbrellas around improving approval processes with government and dealing with government, and that can extend from digitising a whole range of different permits, speeding up the process for approval times for getting permits. I remain committed to trying to remove as many permits as possible, and really challenging all of the public servants at every level about, if you have a permit, why do you need it? And just because you've always done it doesn't mean that it's actually required. And, you know, there's many examples, I think, where we can trim back the expectations on business about what risk is being managed, what harm's being prevented by forcing all businesses to have permits for, you know, pretty basic activities. So I'm not going to bang on about that anymore, because Dom and Bruce, you know, ears will start to bleed because I've heard this enough from me. But that's some of the stuff I think that collectively there's opportunities to take a concerted effort to change some of those expectations that small businesses have to be sort of, you know, the ATO was considered during COVID, you know, free debt, while small businesses are being treated a bit the same way now from those who are higher up the chain. So how do we make sure that can stop? I think from that place-based perspective, what's really important as part of this is there is no cookie cutter approach to this. Every local community is really different. Regions within local communities are different. Industries within the same street are different. And some of the most incredible ideas that I've seen, or greatest ideas to remove red tape or opportunities to help make it easier for small business, have actually come from the ground up, not from people sitting in a government building telling small businesses what to do. So I think that connection with our local connection with consumers and traders and those operating at the main street is really important.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Linda. And yeah, so did you say, was it out of the 77 councils, how many in Victoria are
out of
involved?
the 79, 65 are have signed up. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, fantastic. And Dominique, it was around 44 in Queensland. So yeah, you've got the majority of
77. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So, but yeah, you've got the majority, but yeah, still a little bit more, I guess, advocacy work to do in Queensland. But that's yeah, fantastic. So
but
yeah,
Liz,
hopefully,
just on that, if I could just jump in, I mean, something that Dom does in Queensland that I know our South Australian colleagues also done is they've sought to bring together the municipalities participating in the Small Business Friendly Council initiative, and they've really showcased what's been done in that name and inspired by those commitments. Mm-hmm. And many of those are about placemaking. They are about activation. They are about bringing economic vitality into these community spaces that really turn a location into a community, and bringing forward in Western Australia some examples of streamlining approvals processes, and even town planners have been involved in that to try and remove the friction point. So it's really a great incubator of good initiatives able to be replicated elsewhere, and a real pot of great thoughts that might represent a good forward agenda for many of the people on the call.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, thanks for that, Bruce. So just thinking back to relationships between retailers and small businesses and landlords, what else is there? Anything that you're currently, you know, focused on or working on that's looking at, you know, improving and strengthening, you know, those relationships? We certainly had you know, some really negative, you know, stories and you know, inquiries that came through to us, particularly during COVID. And there was one in particular, a small business in the CBD. Obviously, they got the rent relief, you know, during COVID, and then once we came out of COVID and they, you know, started to get back into business and back into trading, obviously still feeling financial pressure, but then the pressure came, you know, from the landlord to, you know, pay up and pay as quickly as possible. So just wondering if you could reflect on those relationships, or you know, what else can be done to make improvements there.
I'm happy to jump in there, Liz, because we're just in the process of releasing an exit end of lease checklist and some guidance material in that space. One of the things that we're seeing, and it's not unrelated to what you've mentioned there in terms of rental debt. So the arrears that we're seeing in the small business space has increased exponentially. So the dollar values of the disputes where a small business comes to us owing money to a landlord, or usually in that space it's a landlord coming to us. Now it would be uncommon for the small business not to have at least several hundred thousands of dollars in debt to the landlord, and many instances of those and where it's 7 figures of debt. Now, that small business is never coming out of that, and that's part of one of the challenges of the debt that has been accrued. So we are seeing, and then you've got businesses who maybe have survived, maybe they have been doing their repayments okay, or they didn't need to defer during COVID, but then the rental increases and it's just not sustainable, plus the input costs and the broader pressures that they're suffering from. So we're seeing businesses who even survived and even have thrived a bit through COVID, who now are really struggling in the current environment. And then you've got those who have suffered through COVID. So one of the things we've really seen, that with that emotional position and question of walking away from your business site, which is such a fraught and difficult and heartbreaking thing for a small business to do, is there are things that we see in our dispute sense that small businesses are doing which are not helping them as they exit from the lease, and are in fact making their position worse. So we're trying to take the learning that we see from that and apply it at the front end to try and help educate small businesses, landlords and property agents too. We did a presentation in the area of Melbourne last week where we were actually meeting with commercial real estate agents, because we got wind through our local council. We got wind that some local agents were talking up or talking down some terms in lease conditions to people who weren't necessarily sophisticated about understanding leasing terms and had some language challenges. Here's a lease, don't worry about it. Don't worry about X, Y, and Z or whatever, or we'll look after you, or we'll promise all of this. None of it's in writing, or it's in contradiction to the contract. So we've been working with the commercial real estate space as well in this, because I think advisors have a key role to play in that space as well too, Liz. And look, there is a real heartbreaking reality to some of this, is that we do have businesses who are thriving. We have businesses that are opening up, which is fantastic. So businesses that are staggering under significant amounts of debt. One of the things that we're working collectively on all as a group here is how do we help those businesses exit as respectfully and as quickly as possible, because businesses that are struggling in that way are likely to be continuing to accrue debt to the tax office, could be to the payroll, to the state revenue office, and it's certainly often to other small businesses as well.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
businesses even who are struggling, those businesses, there are instances where we need to support the businesses coming through. So that's probably one of the big things we're doing. And we've also just released a webinar that we're sharing really broadly around how to negotiate with organisations like the tax office and your bank if you can't actually pay your bills, and how to try and have constructive conversations with them.
Yeah, fantastic. It sounds like some great tools there. Yeah, and we'd love to if we haven't already been given them, to share them through our membership. And yeah, Dominique, I'm just wondering your reflections in terms of relationships with between landlords and tenants, and yeah, just your thoughts on what Linda's just described.
So I guess the difference probably between Victoria and ourselves is that we've been established for about, maybe close to 2 years now, as opposed to 20. So what we've actually just started doing is we have 3 industry roundtables that we are now working with, one of which is based around solely landlords. The whole occupancy of that particular committee is landlords. And the reason for that is that they are saying to us, what else do you have to help some of these tenants? Because whilst we have to educate them about what their obligations and responsibilities are and what they should be doing rightly as opposed to wrongly, they are also looking to support them, because they're finding tenants are coming to them almost like business coaches and they don't know where else to go. So we're looking to engage with them in a very different way. We're also operating what we'll call almost like a regional committee, and we're looking at using the modified Monash model to basically take all of the most disadvantaged communities throughout Queensland to make sure that they have a voice as to what's actually happening in their local area. so that we are getting a very different story from probably what some of those mainstream landlords might paint to us, because we do know that often it will be the family owned landlord, the superannuation owned landlord that might be harder to deal with, certainly from a dispute type model. And for us, it's about how do we get to those in a different way. And then thirdly, obviously, is an industry roundtable that looks at, how do we get to more tenants via their industry organisations. And all of those are about to commence with new terms of reference shortly. But we've also just created 30 new fact sheets, and all of those fact sheets are about to be translated into the top 3 languages in Queensland, including dynamic translations, and they will shortly be released to all those roundtables, industry bodies. They'll be free to anyone that wants to access them on our website, to make sure that we are doing that education piece, because similarly we see same problems, and we know business owners just simply don't get the time to sort of work on their business. They're just in their business, and sometimes it just feels like a snowball where it keeps rolling harder and bigger and all of that. So we want to give them as many tools as possible. On the tax issue, and certainly financial literacy, which we are also finding is a big component. The financial counsellors in our space in Queensland are absolutely invaluable, and they go out to businesses in each and every region across the state. They are able to allocate up to $5,000 for those individuals to make their lives easier and to help them throughout that process, and can also enter into negotiations with the tax department, amongst other things. But we've also found recently through the Griffiths Tax Clinic that small business, based on one of their studies, is 80% more likely to become insolvent if they don't have Xero or MYOB in their business. So for us, it's now about moving down that path of, what do the basics look like? What do they need to know? And how do we get to them before, they get to a point where they just simply, can't reverse it or can't enter into a payment plan, or they haven't paid their super, so they can't restructure. And so, those fact sheets will also in turn turn into training around, particularly those financial literacy components.
Yeah, wow, that's as you said, that's basic, isn't it? If you can give access to those basic tools, that's a phenomenal difference. Thank you so much for those observations. I'll just now go to some comments and questions in our chat. Thank you to everyone for responding. So Penelope Jamison, hi Penelope. So you're just commenting and saying, yeah, thank goodness for reducing red tape. This helps small business so much, absolutely. And Kerry Daly, thank you as well for your comment here to reducing red tape to make it easier for trader associations to undertake activations, which our communities love, but can be so tricky. We sometimes give up on good ideas. Yeah, absolutely. That's another great comment. And a question from Penelope. Commissioners, where do you think small and medium-sized businesses will be in 12 months, in 12 to 2 years' time, given the pressures that are being felt in our industry? How would a trader association connect with landlords, creating discussion and relationships, all working together for the better, bigger cause? Who would like to go first with that one? Bruce, maybe you can go first with that one.
Sure. Thanks, Penelope, for your comments and your question. Look, 12 to 24 months out is going to be very interesting. If the interest rates stay up where they are, or perhaps even edge a little bit higher, you're going to see a real hollowing out of demand in those discretionary spend categories that Dom was alluding to. And I think that will probably have a scarring effect for some time, because what we saw during COVID was a lot of small and family businesses, particularly in the retail sector, as was mentioned earlier by Linda, they couldn't get staff. They were filling all those shifts themselves, exhausted. And not only have they exhausted their own personal reservoir of resilience, they've also, in many cases, really dipped into their economic reservoirs of resilience as well, and those cash reserves are pretty thin and haven't been replenished. So that could be quite a challenging time. I'm hopeful, though, that off the back of COVID, there was a greater appreciation of the connectedness between a community and their local business areas, their precincts. We did some work, and we We even said, traders coming together is a great thing, a socio-commercial capital where they can feed off each other and learn from each other's experiences, but also draw out that story about the vitality they bring to that space. A former council CEO and a commissioner actually at Whittlesea as well. We knew how important those local district precincts and shopping areas were to, give a real vibe to a community. That can give asset uplift benefit, but the landlords really need to be a part of that conversation. And I think this organisation and the members of it are well placed to bring together those interests and see how well they can align. Vacant shops, people wonder why they're vacant. Well, often the owner of them is also in debt. And if they accept a rent rate below what they told the bank, that'll have direct impact on the value of that property. And they might end up, triggering covenants where they've got to, put in more money or they're called forward to find other financing. The issue around dark and shadow shop fronts where we've got, commercial activity being fed through home delivery services, but no window out into the main street. That has an impact on senses of personal security and an observation that comes with people wandering around streets and seeing traders looking out through the window. The other thing too is the vital role that the traders, we as commissioners, councils and service providers can play. There is very large number of programs out there, whether it's around digitisation, net zero, electrification, even the sorts of tools and resources that Dom was alluding to. Even Google, grow with Google. How do you use Facebook Marketplace? How do you open up new customer opportunities? There needs to be a congregation point where local chambers and local activation teams and eco dev teams in councils can actually bring in these external sources of insight and wisdom to help businesses navigate the times ahead, knowing your numbers, being able to read, financial information to get a health check on how the business is going, knowing when to make a dignified discount, and also knowing when to get trusted advisor guidance. I mean, let's talk about that example you mentioned, Liz. By taking a deferral of rent, in many cases, that's extended the period of that commercial lease. A lot of people don't realise when they sign commercial leases, you can't hand the keys back and your obligations end. You carry that all the way through. So by extending the lease as part of a deferral, you're actually, maybe putting a noose around your neck even longer. And really limiting your choices about what to do next with your life. So there's a bit in all of that, but yeah. I guess I'm jazzed about the excitable opportunities that you guys can bring to life through your connectedness on the ground and the resources that are in the ecosystem.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and as you alluded to, Bruce, there's absolutely no silver bullet, but obviously there is so much that obviously our role in the sector is a vital one, and obviously connecting with other advisors and other levels of support at government, it's all important, and that cooperation and collaboration across the sector is even more important today. So
but just on that, but also be pathfinders. Yeah. Be pathfinders. Yes. I mean, you can bring forward people from within your own business community that have solved certain problems, who can show and convey that know-how to their peers. And that peer-to-peer kind of training, development, aha, sharing insights, that's incredibly powerful. And you can enable those conversations as well. That's that socio-commercial capital I was talking about earlier, and that the crowd becomes the wisdom that a trader can draw from.
Absolutely, spot on. Dominique, just wondering if you've got, and I think this is probably a great final sort of question to sort of finish on before I ask you that question around your favorite Main Street, which I've already given you the heads up on that one. But Dominique, just wondering what your thoughts are, to Penelope's question around where you think small and medium-sized businesses on our main streets will be. You get the crystal ball out in 12 to 24 months with all of the pressures that are being felt. What are your observations on that?
Yeah, look, I think it's really dependent on where they're located, especially in a state like Queensland, and it's very much dependent upon the variations or the diversity of industry in those locations. So I think that places that have, you know, a really healthy ag, you know, community, as well as, you know, mining or construction, as well as, you know, other types of industries typically do better in this environment than if you are solely a tourist town. And we're already seeing that play out sort of across Queensland, where if that is your primary sort of industry within that location, then things are really tough. So I think when you look at that, you know, 12 to 24 month lens, you know, those increases in interest rates, you know, we see it in our calls, you know, anytime one goes up, we see an increase in people going to dispute with businesses. But I think more than that, if we look sort of forward, it is really going to be dependent upon, you know, some of the other triggers that could be pulled, you know, by governments to make it easier. In Queensland, there is an Olympics coming, if you haven't heard. What that means is often there's a lot of infrastructure building. And I think when it comes to categories like discretion, we know that wherever there's residential house building, wherever there is infrastructure projects, you do see more spending or increase in spending, not just because it correlates with jobs, but because it just creates a certain atmosphere. Look, I think it's hard to predict, but it will also be dependent on what we see the ATO start to do in terms of the recovery of some of that tax debt. And I think for small businesses, what the next 12 to 24 months look like is actually greatly dependent on how aggressive the ATO is around that, because I know from certainly all the surveying that's happening here, that's the one thing keeping small business up at night. So, you know, we'll have to see what some of our regulators do moving forward.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought of that, but that's definitely a really crucial one. Linda, just wondering what your final observations are, and then there are a couple of questions that are last minute questions that are coming in as well.
I was
But
just
Linda,
curiously
wondering,
popping. Sorry.
Yeah, go for it,
curiously
please.
popping something in the chat, which I'll jump to now quickly, but I'll finish in the chat because I'm evangelical about it. E-invoicing. Get as many small businesses as you can to sign up to e-invoicing, and going to Dom's point about businesses being set up to be a business right from the very day one, not only specializing in the skill or the superpower that they have to bring to the market. E-invoicing is safe, it's secure, it gets businesses paid faster, it allows them to pay faster, it all runs through your software system. It's so easy. It's run by the ATO, right? But I'd say this, right? Don't be scared. And that's a really important message to the actual small businesses, is not to be scared because it sits with the ATO. The ATO cannot see the invoices at all. The reason it sits with the ATO, and I've given them feedback that I think they needed to brand it, as Bruce has heard, brand it as a different team and not pretend it's not the ATO, put a label in front of it, call it something else, because everyone freaks out because it's with the ATO. They have the technology expertise to roll it out. So it's a safe, secure platform effectively to transfer information and invoices between businesses and payments. And single touch payroll is a reason it sits with the ATO. So people are naturally suspicious about, does this mean the ATO is going to peek inside my shoebox? Am I going to get into trouble for stuff? They can't see anything. So if everyone takes away one thing, and if one person that you talk to or they talk to somebody else, and one person coming out of tonight signs up for e-invoicing, that would be an awesome outcome.
Yeah, great tip. Thank you so much. No, that's awesome. I'm just going to have a look at the comments. So final comment here from Troy. Troy Stutchbury absolutely agrees that a good business mix is incredibly important to have the diversity in a local shopping precinct. Thank you for the link, Linda, to e-invoicing. We should all, be advising our traders and our small businesses on our main streets to be linking in with that. And a final question here to the panel from Kirsten from Yarra Ranges. She wants to know, is it a requirement or legislated that a tenant discloses to the landlord the type of business they're running? The type of business they are running, a business from the premises. This includes home-based business.
I'm happy to jump in there. Yes, you often, and there's a couple of things that question prompts for me. So it's not only just the landlord, obviously, as well, but sometimes, like often, it is a requirement of the lease. So being really careful about what lease you're entering into, what it actually provides for. Home-based businesses, amazing. BHP didn't start in a multi-story building, right? It started from tinny tiny somewhere once in the day. I really need to find out where, because that will help me build out that story for future examples. But in terms of this, is insurance is a really, really important one. It gets into regulation as well, like permits and things like that. But if, say, you're renting, if you're renting your home as an example, and you decide to then run a business from your home, and you've got normal home and contents insurance, or you've got contents insurance as a tenant, what have you, you might not potentially be covered by insurance. So not my wheelhouse. I'm not going to give anyone advice, but I would flag that that's something to be careful about, particularly if you're in, and how properties are zoned as well too. There was certainly more flexibilities through COVID where everyone was encouraged to earn a dollar however they could within the broad parameters of it being mostly legal. But, you know, in terms of council's oversight of what's okay to run out of a residential premises. And if so, one thing we see, unfortunately, a fair bit of is where permitted use, where people in their excitement and passion for their business, they've signed a lease without checking with the local council if what they want to use it for is permitted, and then it turns out that it's not, and then it's heartbreak right from there, because you've signed up to effectively usually a 5-year plus contract with financial obligations, and you might not be able to operate your business. So that's not to stop the home-based businesses, because that's where the unicorns grow from, which is awesome. Just be thoughtful about that.
Yeah. Great tip. Thank you for that. Thank you so much, Linda. Okay, well, let's just totally change the topic now away from your roles as small business commissioners. And we do like to finish off all of our night shift sessions with this question around main streets and your favorite main street. And it can be anywhere in the world. It doesn't have to be in your state and the state that you represent. But yeah, we're just trying to collect as many stories as possible around main streets and what makes them successful and vibrant and fantastic and beautiful. So what's your favorite? What's your favorite main street? Linda, you're square on my screen, so I'm going straight to you.
I'm smiling because when I think about my
Why
favorite
and
main
why?
street, it brings joy. Swan Street in Richmond. It happens to literally be my main street. It's like about 20 meters that way.
Fantastic.
But I've seen it over 20 years how it's developed, and it went from somewhere back in the day where you had like dimmies, all that kind of stuff. It was kind of, there was not much of an offer for local or visitors and residents and things. And just look at how that's grown from a hospitality, restaurant, bar perspective, service offering, new cafes opening up, wine bars in the middle of COVID. Turns out that's a great idea. If you're giving them in sippy cups, just don't go on pub crawls during COVID if you're in Victoria. But it's been amazing to see the regeneration. So Swan Street over the last 20 years, and I'm just talking to my own experience there, is that it's gone through so many iterations, but it's thriving. And I look at other main streets, and I think there's where I see a bit of a difference with Swan Street is there is a collegiality sort of in the area sort of towards it. And look, partly that's been demographics. You build heaps of apartments and you have people way younger than cooler than me coming into the neighbourhood, and they've got discretionary money because I don't have children sucking every dollar out of you. So therefore you've got ability to spend money. And I think that's really interesting as we look at the data about what do communities look like and places look like in the, like where's the next going to be the up, and how do you get on board of that? So I love Swan Street because it makes me happy, and I walk down it almost every day for my daily walk.
Yeah, love it. It is beautiful. I haven't been there for a while, but I'll have to put it on my list. Dominique, what about you? What's your favorite main street?
Well, look, I'm a Queenslander. Caxton Street is my favourite main street, and because of the history. So it sits in Paddington. It's very well known to any Broncos supporters. So if you are a football supporter, this street comes alive anytime there is a massive football game. The way that it's set out now, it's got great sort of connectivity through to rail, amongst other things. There is a stadium at the end of it. There's some very, very well known historic bars and pubs and restaurants. There's a lot of love for that street, and at times there's been festivals there. There's now a really wonderful push for, it's actually a business that's just gone in called Paddington Here and Now, that takes you on a historical walking tour of that particular location. But if you're into your football and you listen to the footballers talk about what it's like to be on those buses as someone from another state being screamed at by Queenslanders as you go down that street in the lead up to a game, it's quintessentially what Queensland is about. And I was originally from New South Wales when I first moved here. and I wore the wrong colour to work on State of Origin Day. I learned that lesson. And now I love it. Now I'm just, you know, I've drunk the Kool-Aid and I'm sold, but that's my favourite Main Street.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that. Although you're wearing blue tonight, but that's it. That's New South Wales, isn't it? I'm not a rugby. That's New South Wales, isn't it? But anyway, Bruce, what about you? What's your favourite and why?
I'm going to sneak two just to honour Dom. Bundaberg in Queensland. Get up there and get a dose of the Kool-Aid. It is a wonderful regional centre with, picking up Troy's point, a very diverse economy surrounding it, but a very diverse offering within the main street. And they've honoured the heritage of the main street. They've got vibey new businesses. I met more young entrepreneurs in Bundaberg's main street than I've seen just about anywhere at a time when only 8% of our business owners are under the age of 30. To see that vitality and optimism, it was just fantastic. And the connectedness between the chamber, business people leaning in to get involved, to support the community, it was great. My ultimate favourite, though, is where I used to be a retailer with my wife, the bodacious Mrs. Bilson. We had a retail business in Main Street, Mornington. It is a fantastic main street. Frighteningly, the residential the tenancy rates there, the rents are the same as South Bank, where we were. And it was a character building time for us, you know, that pillow talk of cash flow and paying the rent. Was the greatest contraceptive ever invented, but putting that to one side, that main street is sensational. To be able to promenade up and down it, to see it as a leisure activity, engaging with it, you know, and as its heritage and its little factoid history bits along the way, the activation around key festivals, the fact they shut it off for nearly 2 months over Christmas, just to let the community take over. I mean, it's a great place. And when you're just exhausted, we'll wander down the end of it and go to the beach. I mean, it is truly a wonderful place. And if you get a chance, get a dose of Mornington. Actually, wind in the hair. Love the breeze off the beach, but great place to be.
Love it, love it. Fantastic. I'm going to put the Bundaberg one on my list as well. I've never been there, but yeah, I'm intrigued now. Mornington I know very well, and Swan Street, but yeah, the Queensland ones, I'll have to add it onto my list. So on that note, fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you to you, Dominique, Linda, and to you, Bruce. I think we'll finish with the final comment from Kerry, who says, love that the commissioners and Bruce, who's also a commissioner, seem to be so aware of the issues and understand complexities for traders, landlords, agents, councils, and traders groups. So yeah, it is just brilliant to know that we have such strong advocates and supporters, you know, for the sector. So we will help you to spread the word with what you do, and to also share all of your resources and support with our membership. So thank you for supporting us, and thank you for being here tonight on the panel. And thanks to all of our attendees tonight. And we also will be recording, we are recording this, so we'll be able to share it with our wider membership and database of over 1,000 people. So we're looking forward to sharing that. And yeah, thanks again, Bruce and Linda and Dominique. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks so much, Liz. And thank you everyone for all your work supporting small businesses too. Have a great night.
Great to be with you. Good night.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. See you, Mary.